So you want to send V11? I'm going to go over the training plan that I used to send my first V11, and we're starting right now. If you guys make it to the end of the video, I'm going to share my secret weapon that I used during my training to end up sending my first V11. And if you guys like climbing hard stuff, consider subscribing below, because that's all I talk about on here. So before I get into my training routine that I used to send my first V11, I want to talk about the steps that I took to develop that routine and the strategies that I went through. The first thing you need to do is go project shopping. Quite simply, try to pick an area and a climb that you want to end up doing. Try to pick something that suits your style. If you go for something that's really difficult for you, it's going to be very hard to climb at your absolute limit. Now, you don't have to pick a V11. You can pick whatever grade or climb that you want to achieve. The thing is, pick one that suits you so that you can better play to your strengths. Another key thing to take into consideration is, can you make it to this area during season, and can you get ready by that time? So if it's somewhere that's in season right now, it might not be the best project to pick unless you want to wait until next year. If you can pick something that's a couple months in advance, you can implement a training routine that can get you there at the right period of time to end up sending your project. So after you've picked some potential projects, try to find out what those projects are like. Watch beta videos, ask people on the internet, read comments, talk to friends, and try to figure out what those climbs are like. Are they crimpy? Are they compression-y? Are they slopey? And that's going to determine how you start training, because if it's crimpy, you want to train finger strength. If it's dynamic, you want to train power. If it's core intensive, you want to train core. So just make sure that you know what your projects could potentially be, and then that's going to determine what you end up training. So for your training plan, I would suggest picking only 2 areas of main focus, and those 2 areas are going to be what we're spending the most time and energy on. So for me, what I picked was finger strength, so I did hangboarding, and power, so I used the campus board. And then what I did is I took 2 other things that I'm going to integrate into those that are less important. So I'm going to do those after them on those days. The one thing I did was pull-up strength. So I was going to do weighted pull-ups and one-arm pull-ups. And the second thing was improving my deadlifts and bench press. So basically working on my chest and my lower back. So I integrated that into a training plan. But again, I focused on those main 2 things, and then the other things came after that. Try and spend your energy on just a few things, because if you try to focus on too many things, you're going to lack the effort level, and it's going to be harder to progress in those things that you're weak on. I would also suggest training core almost every day that you do other training, just because your core is a little different than most of the other muscles in your body. I tried to train core almost every single training session, unless I was so exhausted that I didn't feel like I could put in a good effort level and I just needed some extra rest. So step 3 is going to be dialing in your nutrition, your supplementation, and your sleep. So first off, your nutrition, you guys got to start eating healthily. Try not to overeat. Try to get tons of good quality proteins and high quality calories in your carbs and fats. And there's a lot of different mentalities around that, but I would say high protein is definitely a good idea for trying to build strength. And you guys can play around with high fat and high carb diets. There's a lot of varying information on the internet on that, and I don't really know which one is better. Quite frankly, I don't think any one is particularly better. It's just kind of a trade-off of some sorts. But whatever works for you, whatever you feel best in. If you want to eat, tons of carbs and you feel good and energetic, do that. Just don't get caught up in a dieting fad or something like that, because that's not going to be beneficial for you in the long term. Do whatever you need to do to feel the healthiest and get the most gains in your climbing. So while doing my training, I took 2 supplements very regularly. One being whey protein, so I supplemented that after my workouts often. You guys can play around with that. I think it's a really great way to get a high quality protein right after you're done climbing, and there's a lot of evidence to show that that actually will help you increase your strength. The secondary supplement that I used that I was taking before I went climbing was collagen. This one's not quite as proven, but again, it is protein. So at the end of the day, the worst thing that happens is you get a little extra protein in your diet, but it could help your tendon strength and recovery. So, I mean, if that's something that you can afford and you're willing to try, go ahead and try it. And lastly, try to get as much sleep as you can, preferably over 10 hours if possible. This will help you gain a lot of strength and recover faster. And guys, on those rest days that you're taking, which you need to take a lot of rest days, rest. Do not cross train. Don't try to do too much for yourself. Like if it's a rest day, like, do you want to go on a 50-mile bike ride? Sure, that might be fun, but it could hinder your recovery for your other stuff. You only have so much energy and you want to focus it towards climbing because that's what we're trying to get better at. If you want to cross train, your climbing performance could suffer. So just take that into consideration. If that other thing is more important to you, then go ahead and do that. I'm not telling you that you can't. I'm just saying what I did not do any cross training at all. All I did was climbing, and on the rest days, all I did was rest. So as you work through this training routine, you're going to start to get closer and closer to that trip or the season, time that you want to actually try your projects. So at that point, you need to dial back a little bit. I'm not going to give you guys an exact rundown of the scheduling for all that. There's a really good book by the Anderson brothers that talks a little more about that, and I'll link that down below. But one thing is, you don't want to go into your project super wrecked. That's not going to be beneficial for you. When you get on your trip or you get during the season, try to limit the amount of climbs that you're trying. Only focus on your projects. If they feel feasible, don't go and just say, oh, well, I'm going to try this classic V5. Like, that's fun and all, and I don't want to tell you not to climb other things, but it will potentially hurt your progress on your project if you get wrecked on that. You're going to have to take an extra rest day. You might not be at your full performance for your project. When I did my first V11, I was in Leavenworth for 2 weeks, and I think I sent 3 things, and I sent the V11 after like 6 sessions on my one of the last days of the trip. Now, if I was trying lots of easier stuff, I could have sent tons of things, but that was not my goal, and therefore I abstained from all those other climbs that looked really fun and all my friends were trying. So it's a bit of a trade-off, and you can end up with nothing at the end of the day, but it's a risk that you have to take if you want to send your hardest thing you've ever climbed. One last tip about actually projecting is try to work every move in isolation as much as possible. A lot of times people will just try from the start every single time, and they end up wearing themselves out way too fast. Try to dial it back. Try to get every move perfectly dialed, perfect beta. Make sure it's the easiest beta that you can figure out that works for the entire climb, and then you'll be able to link that section much easier than if you just continually go from the start and ultimately get super wrecked and probably not send your project. So before I go over my training schedule, I'm just going to put out a quick disclaimer. This is an intense training schedule. I would not suggest it unless you talk to a trainer beforehand that suggests you do this, because it's intense and it requires a lot of experience to try to go for. So I was training around 4 days a week, just depending on how I felt. I didn't stick to a concrete schedule, and I don't suggest you guys doing that either, because you have to be able to listen to your body and you have to be able to recover. And sometimes that load that you're putting on your muscles and your tendons is going to build up over time. And if you try to keep that schedule, you might end up getting injured. So a lot of the times I tried to work out 4 days a week. Sometimes I only worked out 3 days. Sometimes I took 3 or 4 days in a row rest because I needed to recover. So my number one priority for this workout routine was to gain finger strength. So that was my top thing that I did. I did that first when I was the most rested, and I tried to give that the most effort. So my fingerboard workout went as follows. What I did was I took a 20mm edge and I hung from that, and I added weight so that I could almost fail at 10 seconds. So I'd hang for 10 seconds and I'd feel like I was about to let go. And I ended up doing around 100 pounds added weight with that. So once I've determined what my added weight should be, what I did was I would go and gradually work up. So I'd start at about 50% of my max, and I'd work up to 80%, 90%, depending on the day and how I was feeling. And I would do 4 sets. So I would just add weights up until that 90% about, and I'd try to hold it for that 10 seconds. And then what I would do is I would do 2 sets, one on a 10mm edge. So I would just hang on that, and I'd try and hang on that for 10 seconds. And then I would hang on an 8mm edge for as much time as I could. And that would usually just be a couple seconds. And that was my hangboard routine. Now I typically do that 2 times a week. And that's a pretty intense routine, but it definitely, I saw tons of strength gains in my fingers. So I would highly suggest trying to come up with something similar, but like I said, maybe go talk to a trainer before you go full force into that. So my secondary routine was to gain power, because I knew that one of my projects that I wanted to do was a dyno. Actually, 2 or 3 of them were dynos. So I wanted to do campus boards. So what I would do is I would do ladders. So I'd get on the biggest rungs, and I would do ladders, and I would go up, and I'd try and pull it down and go up, pull it down, go up, pull it down, skipping one, going up and down, doing lots of things like that. And then I would do maxes. So I would just start at the bottom, and I would go up as high as I could reach, stick it, match it, drop, do it with the other arm. And that I would do for about maybe 10 minutes. I didn't typically count the amount of sets. I was just doing as much as I could kind of do within that time period, taking about a 1 or 2 minute rest in between. And I found really good strength gains from that as well. I would typically do the hangboarding on one day, then I would take a day and do the campus boarding, and then I would take a rest day and I would repeat. Now, on the days that I was doing hangboarding, I would also do weighted pull-ups, because it was a little different than the hangboarding itself, where the hangboarding was just on the fingers. I would do weighted pull-ups on a bar or a really good jug. I would determine my max by just doing 1 pull-up with as much weight as I could. And then from there, I would go and I would do 50% of that all the way up to 90% of that. And I would just go until failure on each one of those sets. Often at 90%, I would be able to get 2, and then I would up it on the next week. And then on the days that I was doing campus boards, I would either do deadlifts and bench, and I would do a similar thing with those. I determined on a 1 rep max, and then I would go from a 50% load up to like an 80 or 90% load until failure on all of those. And then after I would do those 2 exercises on a climbing day, I would typically do a core workout. And for that, I'm going to refer you to a video that's linked somewhere up here on core workouts for climbers. And I would do a similar workout to that after every session. Now again, this workout routine was very intense. At some times I would be so exhausted that I would have to take an extra day or something like that. And you need to listen to your body, and you need to understand the kind of intense loads you're putting on it. Now, if you get your nutrition right, you get your sleep right and all that stuff, you will be able to push it a little harder. But again, it takes time for your muscles and your tendons to recover, so be extremely cautious when doing something like this. So my secret tip that I mentioned at the beginning of the video is simply trying your hardest that you can during all of this. And that's something that is really easy to say, and it's really hard to actually do. So if you guys can focus on just trying 100% on all your training and your project and everything like that, you will see massive gains that were already there, and you just have to tap into it. It's really hard to do, and you might think that you're doing it right now, but I guarantee that you're not. You have a little bit extra in the tank for all this stuff, and you need to tap into that. And if you can tap into that more efficiently, you're going to find yourself absolutely crushing it out there this season. If you guys have any questions about anything that I've talked about during this video, or want maybe some help determining what your project should be or what your workout plan should be or something like that, go ahead and contact me. I'd love to set up something on one-on-one with you and give you a chat. I'm not charging anything for this. I'm just doing it as kind of like a friend-by-friend basis. I'm not a trainer, I'm not an expert, but I do know some information, and sometimes it's good to talk to somebody else about it and learn a little bit, because I'll learn something and you will too. So go ahead, seriously, don't worry about it. Just send me an email and let's start chatting. So if you guys want to learn a little more about training for climbing, I would suggest checking out this playlist. And if you guys want to watch my latest video, go ahead and check out this one down here. And I hope you guys really enjoyed this. And until next time, I'm Bryan with Bomber Beta. See ya.